Hey, what's up, Matt?
Not much. How you doing, Joe?
Happy Monday to you.
Indeed, we're back to Monday, and it's outrageously hot in Utah in July.
Yeah, it's way too damn hot here.
Yeah.
But thank God it's Monday. So, yeah, how was your weekend? Did you ever do anything fun?
I mostly worked and hiked up Mill Creek Canyon, so that was my
Oh, nice.
weekend. Yeah. About yourself?
Yeah, worked a lot and climbed, and yeah, that's about it. So, but typical weekend. Oh, and I ran a half marathon for fun. So that was, I guess, something else. But yeah, so my training for the next bit's going to be like half marathons or laps on East Granger. So stay tuned for that.
And
I
what's the mileage on East Granger again?
think it's like 3 miles up and back. No, 3 miles one way.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So and then so I think next training is gonna be like 2 laps on that.
Nice.
So it's not as bad as doing the west face and going down to the east though, because that's west face of Granger is horrific for anyone.
What, just like way more altitude gain?
Yeah, it's like 2.5 miles and about 3,000 feet of gain versus 3 miles and 2.2 and a half maybe going up the east side. So yeah,
Okay. How do you get to the east side again?
just go up Mill Creek.
Up Mill Creek Canyon.
Yeah,
Okay.
you park at Church Fork and then just start walking. It's really
Okay.
crowded though, so if you want to hit it in the morning. So
Yeah, everything is so crowded now. It's COVID times, I guess.
yeah, everyone loves the outdoors. So
Yeah. Can't
yeah,
be with other humans, but still get out.
yeah, it happens. So
Yeah.
looks
Yeah.
like there's some pretty interesting announcements last week with BigQuery and whatnot at the Google On Air event. So I think the thing that caught our attention was what is that? Let me share this real quick. So uh, yeah, BigQuery Omni.
Yeah,
So
now this is an interesting play because not only is BigQuery making a play to AWS customers, but really they're going after products like Redshift and Snowflake. I mean, fundamentally, this is a big deal, and so now it comes down to their execution and their ability to get customers to try this out once it gets out of alpha.
mhm. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what the traction is on this. So for those who don't know, BigQuery Omni is a way where you can do multi-cloud analytics with BigQuery. So in the past, I mean, you've had BigQuery, but it's been in GCP. You know, in order to bring your data in from other clouds, you have to ship it over to Google Cloud and bring your data into BigQuery that way. With Omni, they're actually leveraging Anthos, which is their multi-cloud product they offered last year at Google Next. So Anthos has been getting quite a bit of pickup, especially with larger enterprise where you want a multi-cloud experience. And it's interesting to see that they're extending this to BigQuery because it removes one of the biggest complaints that we've seen from our clients where if you're in AWS, for example, it's sort of a non-starter to bring your data into BigQuery because you have to pay a bunch
Right.
of fresh charges, and that sucks for
Well, and
everyone.
it's kind of a shame too, right? Because it's one of the most compelling, what we call big data warehouse products. I mean, it has advantages and disadvantages relative to the other common big data warehouse products, but there are many customers that could make really good use of this, just didn't have access because their data was in AWS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, so this article here that is on Google Cloud talks about sort of the how does BigQuery Omni work? This is pretty interesting. So I mean, the biggest complaint would be or the biggest concern I would say for a lot of people would be I might have to pay egress charges, right, to ship my data over to BigQuery. And when you're talking about BigQuery, notice the word big. You're not talking about small data usually. If you're going to use BigQuery, especially in a multi-cloud sense, I mean, in some cases, it might just be cheaper to ship your data over if it's small enough, right? There's plenty of ways to do that. Omni reminds me of something where, this is like you got a lot of data.
Yep.
You want to use BigQuery. That's where it becomes compelling.
Yep.
But the cool thing with how it's set up is, I mean, it kind of brings BigQuery to your cloud.
Exactly. They're shipping the compute to you. I mean, it's AWS compute, but it's Google software and Google's auto scaling capabilities running on top of EC2, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So this is going to be pretty interesting to see. I think, to Google's credit, they've thrown down the gauntlet in terms of multi-cloud,
Yeah.
for the enterprise, and now it's multi-cloud for analytics. I've not seen any other cloud, really try and do this. I mean, there are offerings like Snowflake where, you can definitely leverage other clouds for your data warehouse use case. But this is, it's the first time I've seen a cloud that's really said, well, let's just bring our product to you. And
Yeah. And they're pitching it as multi-cloud, but I'm wondering if it will be competitive just as a product that runs on AWS as well. So in other words, if I'm a customer and I don't really care about running anything on GCP or any data that resides in GCP, and I just want to run BigQuery Omni on AWS, is it going to be compelling as a competitor to Snowflake and Redshift?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a question of like, is it compelling against Snowflake and Redshift now, and I suppose Synapse as well. And now that you have Omni sort of in the living room of AWS, what are Redshift and Snowflake going to do to continue competing against BigQuery? So of course every vendor is going to say that their product is like stands on its own and is awesome and it has no competition whatsoever. But I think I do want to bet money that Omni's going to it's going to be a wake up call.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to this, but to me, there are two big advantages that BigQuery has over the competition. And so one of those is just simplicity. In other words, it is truly serverless. There's very little that you have to do to manage your BigQuery setup. You basically just run your queries and pay by what you scan. And second is just the scalability. Like you can scale up to 100 terabyte queries very easily, seamlessly, without scaling any infrastructure or anything else. And that's something that Snowflake and Redshift still kind of struggle with right now. Even if you max out your Snowflake data warehouse, you start hitting some bottlenecks.
Mm-hmm.
But Snowflake is really compelling as an enterprise data warehouse. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest questions that are going to be with Omni are like, what's the pricing model, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's still an alpha, but I can't imagine that bringing Anthos and BigQuery to your cloud is going to be $5 per terabyte. Like that's, part of me wonders, okay, so then if it's going to cost more, than like who's this targeted at, right?
Yeah. So then maybe it is truly
data. You could just use a storage transfer and just move your data into Google Cloud. And that's not going to be too much. So it's got to be targeted at like I would imagine, maybe the larger enterprises that are on AWS. So yeah, this is fascinating. Google throwing down the gauntlet with BigQuery Omni for sure, and excited to try this out with maybe our own account, but with customers as well. And this is going to be. These are new days in data warehousing for sure. So.
Yeah, I'll be really curious to see the pricing and the performance. I mean, one problem with Omni just out of the box is that one of BigQuery's key strengths on GCP is that you have compute basically integrated with the Colossus storage layer. So Colossus is kind of Google's competitor to S3, but BigQuery gets really low-level access to that and is able to place data into specific data centers and such, which they can't do on the S3 side, as far as I know. I don't think Amazon offers any APIs like that. And so how is that going to bottleneck the performance? And then I'm very curious to see how cross-cloud queries will work. They have AWS Direct Connect running, but you're still going to be pushing a lot of data through a small tunnel effectively rather than being in the same data center.
Well, yeah, especially when you got AWS and the regions, right? So yeah, it definitely appears that this is regional, given the fact that it says region. So, and then Google Cloud, the fact that it has, global scale with its, with its various regions and petabit network, it kind of makes me wonder too, like, it's just the regional play, really. So, it is what it is. I mean, you're going to be limited by that, but that is also a consideration too. So if you have your data in Google Cloud, for example, and maybe you had multi-region enabled, then it'd be interesting to see how this impacts that. So
yeah, definitely. So yeah, looking forward to getting hands-on with this and trying it out with some customers and really profiling out the performance across clouds. So
yeah, it'd be interesting. Another thing that came up recently was, news. So we're kind of big on certs. So Google
It's
Cloud, this is interesting where, they're starting to have some surveys. I think I took this survey actually, but it was just like, how is the certification helping you? I know that for the longest time that, it was kind of advertised that Google Cloud, what is a professional cloud architect cert was like the most valuable IT cert out there. I think that's been the case for a few years now. And, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, these are very positive signals. Certifications are helping people in their careers. So.
Yeah, that's certainly been my experience. I think I was very skeptical of certs when I first started in IT and working on AWS. But once you take the cert, you realize, oh, there are all these problems that the cert would have solved for me if I'd had it up front. Because it's not going to teach you to be like a really proficient engineer or architect, but it will show you a lot of the pitfalls that you can run into if you just don't know what you're doing when you're trying to architect a cloud setup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as we always say, each cloud has its own way of doing stuff, and
Yeah.
for you to, I mean, I've done this myself, and I've seen countless people do the same thing, where you have your own opinion about how the cloud should do things, and if your opinion and the cloud's way of doing stuff doesn't jive, I would say the cloud wins every single time, because you're going to be fighting against that cloud and making your efforts more difficult than they should be.
Right. Yeah, and I
So.
think what we typically see is that the way you architect things will be informed by your background and biases. And so in the data science world, that typically means that people try to architect things the way they would on their laptop because they're used to like running pandas and some simple frameworks on their laptop. And so they just try to implement exactly the same thing in the cloud. And then they don't handle security correctly because of course on your laptop you don't think about security in the same way. You don't think about firewalls and network security, and all of those things are things that you need training in.
Yeah.
I think the same thing applies actually to people from an on-prem background, right? So if you're used to running a server farm in racks that you own inside of your building, then you're going to try to architect the cloud in the same way, which is not the right way to do it. You lose a lot of advantages of the cloud if you try to do things that way.
Well, yeah. That's how I think the cloud becomes more expensive for people, is if you try and treat it like you did in the past, maybe on-prem or something like that. But that being said, get a cert. If you're going to spend a lot of time in the cloud, I would say getting a cert is a really good investment, both in terms of your being able to function in the cloud that you're in, but also like it makes you more marketable in the job market.
Yep.
So AWS certs are worth a lot of money. I think Azure certs are worth a lot as well, because the number of people, there's a lot of people working in the cloud, but the number of people who are competently working in the cloud is I would argue a much smaller number. And so if you can show, and these certs are not easy. I think, Matt and we're not dumb. And I think we found the certs the exams to be pretty challenging, actually. I mean, I remember walking out of a couple of them. It's like, oh my God, I feel like I just got beat up. So that's.
And the study process really levels you up. And the nice thing about studying for the cloud is that, okay, so traditionally, say 15 years ago, if I was studying for Microsoft cert, I kind of had to get my hands-on experience somewhere else because I probably didn't, at home, I wasn't going to own my own server that I could play around on. So I had to study the books, and then hopefully at my job, I could get enough experience to pass. Great thing about cloud certs is that I can just spin things up on my own account, play around with them, understand the minutiae of how they work, and study the book. It's a much more hands-on process without having to have an employee sponsor to get the cert done, which means that, I hate to say it, but the job market's tough right now. And so if you are out of a job, unfortunately, you can still spend your own time and get these certs to level up for the next job that you want to get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the stats on this, the survey results are pretty compelling, I think. When you looked at, again, this is obviously Google Cloud telling you that their certs are amazing and you should totally get one. But I mean, the numbers kind of speak for themselves, at least for the self-reported groups. So, a quarter of people took on more responsibility or leadership roles, and 20% got a raise. That's pretty cool. and it just seems to, there's very little downside, I would say, for getting a cert, except for the time investment and possible agony of taking the exam. But apart from that, you come out, I would say, a much stronger practitioner in whatever you had studied. I can't see much downside to it. If you're going to spend a lot of time in the cloud, invest the time. And it's pretty cool because on the AWS side too, I mean, they just recently announced this other thing called IQ Expert. And this is, I wish GCP and Azure would do something like this. This is a way that you can leverage your certifications to actually start consulting. And AWS is providing a new marketplace for this, which is like, I think is a really good idea. I think they launched this last month. So I mean, pretty recently. But now you can, when you get these certs, I mean, it obviously helps out your company, assuming you have a company. But in a lot of cases, people want to get certs to signal that they're competent and might be willing to act as a third-party expert and consultant. So props to AWS for doing this service. I think this could be potentially a game changer, because for the longest time, it's like you get these certs and then it's like, well, okay, now I have a cert and my employer likes that. And maybe if I work for a consulting company, they can leverage my cert, but I would like to leverage my cert.
Exactly. Yeah. And we're part of a couple of different partner programs with clouds. The problem with partner programs is that they're really designed to favor large shops. And essentially this sounds like a partner program for individuals, which means that you can get started in the consulting business without having 5 people and 10 certs, which is kind of what's required right now to really get up into the higher tiers of AWS or GCP partnership.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we're a small shop, but I mean, we punch way above our weight class. And I think part of our secret to our success is actually our size. Like, being small is an advantage, but at the same time, I would say in the partner ecosystem, sometimes you're penalized for being small. So we're incentivized to grow the business, which we'll continue doing, but at the same time, I think some of these requirements are maybe a bit artificial in that sense, where just because you have N number of people with a certain number of certs, that doesn't necessarily mean you're like the better partner. That just means you have more people and you're actually paying more payroll for certs and stuff. So I can see their argument that, level up your organization by getting more people. But I think with AWS IQ, it sort of brings it back to, well, I mean, how good are you as a individual expert and practitioner?
Right. Yeah, and the way I see these partner programs, they're kind of designed around the real traditional large consulting shops like Accenture. That makes sense. Like, these clouds are going to build off of what's already out there in the enterprise space. At the same time, cloud should make it much easier to be agile and small and still make big contributions. And so I think this program is finally starting to recognize that and say, hey, if you're an individual, you can still be a great consultant. Here's a way for you to do that. Just get the certs and go out and do the work.
Right. Yeah, get the certs, do the work. Cool. Well, speaking of work, I guess it's time we get to work. So anyway, happy Monday to you, Matt, and we'll talk to you soon. So,
sounds good. Take care.
You guys. Bye.